Well, it's hard to believe it's that time of the week already, but it's Thursday, so it's time for another weekly fishing report. Now this weekend's weather is looking pretty good at this stage, so fingers crossed this holds true because I know a lot of us are very keen to head offshore. If it does hold true, the 15-mile gutter as well as the northern gutter are going to be two areas well worth a look. In the small weather windows we have been seeing, there's been great numbers of Venus tusk fish around, grassy sweetlip, and even some really big barchy coral trout in these areas. Now north around the 5 degree has seen some big Spanish mackerel starting to show up at this reef. Not in really big numbers yet, but some really cracking sized fish, so it is well worth a look around that area as well. And for those in the smaller boats fishing the inshore reefs, there's been good numbers of grass sweetlip and grunter around the 2 mile, Ryan's Patch off Burnett Heads, as well as artificial off Elliott Heads, with even some solid sized school jewfish around there as well. So fingers crossed the weather holds true, because I know a lot of us are very keen to head out with these strong winds we've been seeing. We are absolutely ready to get out there and get into some fish. Now moving into the Burnett, those bigger tides last weekend did see the crabs really come on the move. There were some great numbers around and plenty of people got stuck into a good feed of mud crab. And the prawns around the port are also in much better numbers, with young staff member here, Little Mitch, Mitchell Kling, getting into some great numbers of prawns. The bigger tides did make it a little hard to get an accurate throw on these guys, with only a short period of time to really capitalize and get as many as you could around the tide changes, but it was still possible, and he got some really good size and good numbers of prawn. For those fishing the Burnett, there's been some great numbers of big jack caught during the run out tide on any of the rock bars from toss rocks all the way down towards the mouth. And if flatty and grunter is more your thing, the flats around Kirby's Wall has produced great numbers of these fish during that run out tide, as well as fishing any of the drop offs and the rock bars towards the mouth of the river with whole sprat, mullet fillet, or if you're into your lure fishing, soft vibes hopped along the bottom has worked quite well for these fish. Now the Kolan River has seen a really good run of big sized grunter through this system over the last week. Targeting these guys depending on the tide is key though. So fishing the shallow flats towards the mouth of the river system during that incoming tide and even at the top of the tide has worked really well, and targeting them with fresh yabbies, or if you're into soft plastics fishing, very lightly weighted soft plastics in a natural coloured like a bloodworm or a motor oil colour. Now if you're fishing the run out tide, getting into some deeper water, fishing the deeper holes, fishing up around Booyam Bridge and the drop offs and holes around that area has seen more of these grunter caught there during that run out tide. And similar to the Burnett, we've been seeing some big jacks caught in this system during the run out tide, especially on live baits and mullet fillet. And with the bigger tides last weekend, we did see great numbers of queenfish, trevally and tarpon caught, especially around Booyam Bridge, but anywhere where there's current. And although not very big, these fish are great fun, especially for the lure fishermen. Okay, moving further north to Baffle Creek, the big tides last weekend did see some really good numbers of jack caught, especially up the top of the creeks, like top of Oyster Creek and even up the top of Baffle, the main river itself. With a little bit of rain this week, we've also seen this continue on with the jack up the top of these systems really feeding hard in that dirtier water, especially with some prawns skipping up the shallow creeks there. For those fishing around Winfield, there's been really good numbers of bream and whiting with those bigger tides, especially on the incoming tide, fishing the flats and those patchy weed edges and flats with a bit of weed on top of them. Fresh yabbies have been the ideal bait if you can get your hands on them. For the lure guys though, a top water hard body like a Walker dog or a top water popper has been absolutely dynamite on these whiting and bream. Just fishing extremely light fluorocarbon leader or even light monofilament line on these guys has worked extremely well to get the bite. The crabbing in the Baffle has been a little tough because there's been plenty of undersized bucks around. Those using a lot of bait in their pots, but more importantly, fresh bait in their pots seems to be getting the better quality bucks at the moment. With still plenty of smaller guys in there, but the bigger guys seem to be more attracted to that fresh bait. Whether it be fish frames or chicken, it really hasn't made too much of a difference. Just fresh is best at the moment. And now the Elliott River has been fishing superbly at the moment with a great run of grunter and flathead all throughout this system. At the mouth of the river, we have seen these guys up on the shallow flats with those bigger tides. However, if you are fishing the river during that run out tide, these fish have been retreating off these flats and you have found better numbers fishing the deeper banks and the deeper holes, especially if you're fishing that river at the bottom of the tide. At the very bottom of the tide, these fish have been congregating in these deeper holes, so well worth fishing them. If you're into your lure fishing, soft plastics or soft bobs hopped along the bottom have been very effective. If you're into bait fishing, whole prawns, whole sprat, or a big strip of mullet fillet has worked really well in these deep holes with bycatch of cod and even the occasional jack. Now, if you are targeting jack in the Elliott River, pushing up the top of the system has been well worth the effort. Soft plastic fishers have been getting into some really good numbers of jack. If you're into live baiting, fishing the deeper areas and any of the rocky structures in this system has been working really, really well. And the crabbing in the Elliott has been unreal at the moment. Plenty of crabs around for everyone. Leaving your pots in overnight though has been best, but if you are fishing the system, dropping your pots in at the start of your session and picking them up at the end of your session has also had a few good crabs in them, but overnight's definitely the way to go at the moment. And with the bigger tides last weekend with that new moon, we did see some really good numbers of whiting caught in the Elliott. Beachworms or fresh yabbies worked really, really well, but if you could pick one, get your hands on some fresh yabbies. Pump yabbies at the low tide and fish over those same flats you just found those yabbies on with that incoming tide, and those whiting will get up onto those shallow banks with that incoming tide and you should be on for a pretty good session. Well, the last week did see some pretty consistent northerly winds, and that did see these barra bite a lot harder in that shallower water on those shallow wind-blown bays and points. Now, up in the South Armour B, in the North Armour B, Hearts and Insane Bay, all these areas house great numbers of feeding fish, and the bite was hot, especially on hard body lures. The key when using hard bodies at the lake is making sure that they suspend in the water column. This enables you to implement a very long pause into your retrieve, which is when these barra are going to bite. Sometimes a 20 or even a 30-second pause is what's necessary to get one of these barra to bite. Now, the Samaki Reddick DS80s are great for this out of the pack. They suspend there beautifully, you do not need to do a thing, and this is great for this type of fishing when you are jerkbaiting these barra. For those fishing the lake at night time, we have seen paddle tail soft plastics or swim baits like your Molex 140s, Sicario DTFs, Shimmer Pro rigs, Fishcraft Dr. Shads, all that type of presentation work a lot better at night. Just a slow rolled big paddle tail to create a lot of movement and trigger a bite. For those live scoping the basin, nighttime has been best for these guys, but trolling is still an extremely effective technique at the moment, especially during the day because you're covering ground and people are still catching plenty of quality sized fish, with the majority of them being over a metre. Now, if you are fishing the basin and you are finding it quite tough, don't be afraid to pop down into Bird Bay. There's been some really big numbers of barra in Bird Bay over the last week. Just getting one to bite is another story. We have found that jerk baiting in Bird Bay has got the best results because, like I said, you can stall that lure right in front of their face for an extremely long time. Just the key, make sure that lure suspends so it doesn't float or sink too quickly. Just either a slow sink or a slow float, but ideally it just sits there dead still in the water column to really trigger a bite when these barra are a bit shut down. Well, that wraps up another weekly fishing report. Fingers crossed the weather holds true and the inshore and offshore guys can get out there and get stuck into some really good quality fish. So we'll catch you next week with another one.